Sego, friends, welcome back to the final chapter of Mad Bear. Chapter 15, Focus and Move Energy. A day like today, it's a good day for untroubling. Weeks after our cross-cultural conference in Parksville, I talked with Ethel Lombardi on the telephone. We had missed her at our conference. She was the only one of the special guests who had accepted our invitation and not attended. I was aware of her absence, but in my preoccupation with all the other delegates and staff, I had not been able to give her much thought, and I had not heard from her since the summer when we had talked about Mad Bear. I was at a gathering in a private home following a seminar in Minneapolis when I discovered that our host was a friend of Ethel's. "In fact, I'm expecting to be in touch with her soon," he told me. "When I talk to her, I'll mention that I've met you and that you send your regards, if that's all right with you." "That would be good," I told him. I haven't spoke with her for quite a while. Later, while everyone was having coffee and dessert, he beckoned me from the hallway. "I got Ethel on the phone now," he said. "I thought I'd give her a try while you were here, and she does want to talk with you. Take the phone in the bedroom there." He closed the door after me and went back to join the others. I picked up the phone. "Hello, Ethel?" "I think it's about time I let you know why I did not show up at the conference," she said directly. "Well, we missed you," I responded, "but I understand. I know you have a really busy—" "No, that wasn't it," she said. "First, let me ask you, how's Mad Bear? How did everything go?" "Fine," I told her, "and wonderfully." She listened while I gave a brief but positive report. "Good," she said. "I had a good feeling about it, but I knew I shouldn't go. Well, let me tell you what happened. We arranged I would do a healing for Mad Bear, right? When I sat down to do my work, you know what I do. I think the healing is directed and sent to him." "Right," I said. "As soon as I focused my attention on Mad Bear, well, I have, or had, a squash blossom necklace, a Native American piece. It was a gift to me, and it hung on the wall behind me where I sat. As soon as I focused my attention on him, the squash blossom necklace blew apart. I knew what it was, in a sense. I knew something was going on beyond what I wanted to become involved with." I told her about Joel and the necklace Mad Bear had given him. "This is Mad Bear's work," she said. "So it was Mad Bear's contest. I know he's up to it. Has to be. It's his capacity. But it's not my contest, not my challenge. I realized that I had better not show up there and get pulled into something that doesn't belong to me." "But what you did helped," I told her, "and what happened must have helped. Mad Bear did make an amazing recovery, and a pretty fast and complete recovery, as far as I could see. In fact, I was talking with him right around that time, and he told me on the phone, he said, 'I can feel the energy. I can feel it coming in now.'" "Since I already engaged myself to some extent," she continued, "I decided to disengage and pull out, not get caught up in it. So that's the reason I didn't show up or even get in touch. I thought it best to stay completely disconnected. But it's good to talk to you. It's good to hear everything went well." And it really did. Like I said, everything unfolded beautifully. There was the contest, though, I know, but I think hardly anyone was aware of that. The delegates knew they were working with their challenge, the planetary challenge, but in the background there was a challenge as well. "In the background," she said, "there is always a challenge as well." Jison returned to the United States one day while I was at Mad Bear's new home on the Tuscarora Reservation, and Tim and Pam telephoned to tell me that he had arrived in San Francisco with his party and was hoping to meet with Mad Bear and me. "I knew he'd be back," Mad Bear said. "What's he doing? Is he coming up here? Sound like you were talking about New York." "I don't know. I was only talking with Tim and Pam. He's already arrived with whomever he's brought with him, but they haven't actually seen him yet. Maybe Jison could call here. You don't mind if he has your number, do you?" "Well, that'd be okay as far as Jison goes. Or it'd have to be Hiro, I guess. But it's not a good time for him to be coming up here, though, with us going back out to Arizona. Maybe that's what we should all do. Go out to Arizona. I bet we could talk him into that." Tim and Pam met the group in San Francisco, and during the several days they were out there together, they did all the communicating. Once they had their tickets and their schedules, I spoke briefly with Hiro to assure him that I would meet him at the airport in New York at the right time and place and would arrange accommodations in the city. Lightly, I suggested the possibility of Tucson, and Hiro said something like, "You know Sensei is anytime okay for anything. If Mr. Madbear will want, he will satisfy for anything." Occasionally, I had corresponded with Hiro and Yoko in Japan, and occasionally, they had mentioned Jison was thinking of another visit. Nothing, however, had been planned. As was often the case with Madbear, Jison had apparently felt that the time was right one morning and had gotten his people together and started for the airport. So I myself was set out for the airport. So I myself was set out to the airport. "But it'll all work out good," Madbear assured me. "You and Mike and I gotta fly out of New York anyways. We'll get together down there, see if Jison wants to go to Tucson, which I'm willing to bet he'll go, and if not, we at least got our chance to see him in New York. You think we could get another room or two for Mike Bastine and me?" Madbear only wanted a couple days to secure the place and throw a few things together, and he and Mike would join us in the city. When I arrived in New York City, I went first to the Lexington Hotel. I was assured that the rooms were available and that our group could be accommodated however they should wish as soon as they arrived. So I brought them all by taxi from the airport to the Lexington Hotel. Jison seemed elated when we met and excited in his quiet way to be back in the United States and at the prospect of seeing Madbear once again. Hiro introduced me to the others. They were an artist and his son, and a young woman about the son's age, perhaps 25 or so. Yoko and her mother had remained in Japan, but Hiro was once again at Jison's service, and the three who had come along were new friends of Jison's, or actually, I learned, they were his followers. Hiro had explained that the man was a well-known and respected classical traditional artist in Japan, whose son had been helped by Jison. The son had fallen face first into the propeller of an outboard motor and his face was ripped to shreds. Someone at the scene of the accident knew about Jison and persuaded them that they should go at once to this healer monk and avoid stitches and plastic surgery, which would result in permanent disfiguration. The son had been taken instantly to Jison with the flesh hanging down from his face. Right before the father's eyes, Jison had repaired the young man's face with his hands so that not a scar or a single sign of injury remained, and both the father and son had been with him ever since. The young woman was also a follower who had met Jison only months earlier. Owing to some disease that Hiro could not identify in English, she had been so thin, frail, and shapeless that the others had thought she was a weak little boy. I told Hiro that she looked fragile but quite healthy. "If we have photographs from before, nobody will believe it," he said. I was afraid at first that Hiro was the only one among the group who spoke English at all, and that he would surely tire as the days went by, but the young woman and the son, I soon discovered, could understand me fairly well, and in time, they began to speak. Jison assured me, as soon as we were settled in the hotel, and before I had a chance to mention it to him, that they would be interested in going to Tucson, if it would not be a disturbance to Masuta Bear. Their schedules were open, he told me, and they were willing to do whatever we advised. "He has money now," Hiro told me. "So much his own money he is getting, because now he become a kind of famous. Maybe because of Yoko's mother, some way. Many people, rich people, know he helps so much for their life. And they give him lots of money, even he never requests. So we will use it for travel and for his temple." "Well, I don't know what you have in mind for now," I told him, "but Madbear won't be here for a couple of days. We have time to do New York City if you're interested. We could be tourists for a while if you want." "You can be our guide," he said. We walked along Broadway, ate in the Waldorf Astoria, visited the Empire State Building and the United Nations, and rode on the Staten Island Ferry. Jison had designed and made himself some clothing for just this sort of occasion so that, without totally relinquishing his monk's bearing, he could appear a bit more like a natural person to the Western public. I wanted, in the limited time that Jison had to spend in New York, to accomplish something more meaningful than simple sightseeing. I knew someone in the city who was pursuing shamanic studies with Michael Harner, and I was friends with the International Center for Integrative Studies. Through these friends, I arranged some visits and mini-conferences with Jison. He is willing and able to give some pretty fascinating demonstrations that are not healing demonstrations, I explained. Healers can't usually give demonstrations because healing demonstrations don't usually work. I think what Jison does is more closely related to martial arts, which is a common practice of Buddhist monks actually, but it does have implications for healing. For our first meeting in Michael Harner's office, Jison and Hiro wanted to arrange an additional interpreter. "Sensei doesn't want to make a speech," Hiro told me, "but anyway, you know people ask questions and it's hard for me because maybe I cannot understand American way to think this kind of subject." But I did not know of anyone in New York City whom we could fill this role. "There is," Hiro reminded me. "You remember that lady that guided for us at United Nations? She was so good in Japanese, and she's American." We met with her at the United Nations building. She agreed, and she came along with our group when we met with Michael Harner and his colleagues in his office. But our American interpreter found it even more of a challenge than Hiro did to speak for Jison. She was perhaps fluent in conversation, and she had trained and practiced for the United Nations tours, but she explained that Jison was difficult to understand even in his everyday conversation, and especially in his esoteric explanations. His demonstrations stimulated questions, and the questions stimulated him to offer elaboration in Japanese that she found impossible to translate completely. I had no idea what Jison would do until I watched him along with the others. I had already seen him produce heat on whatever part of the subject's body the observers pointed to. Whatever specific area on the legs, back, neck, or shoulders was selected, the heat was very evident to both the subject and the observers. This demonstration Jison repeated many times so that the group could experience it subjectively as well as see it. He then introduced the young woman in their party and told them something of how he had been working with her. We moved two of the tables in the room, and he placed her on the tables with the back of her head on the edge of one table and the heels on the other, so that she stretched between them like a human bridge. Then he had someone sit on her stomach. She was not stiff or tense, but would bend with the weight and still not slip off the tables. Jison had to prepare her for this by sweeping his hands over her body, a process similar to the one he used to produce heat. But he explained that the essence of the procedure was probably not visible to us. Without his preparatory assistance on Jison's part, neither she nor any of the others who tried it could do it. They could not maintain their position on the table, even when there was no added weight. But with his help, all who tried could stay stretched between the two tables, comfortably relaxed, while others sat upon them or walked across them from one table to the other. As I had seen happen before with Jison, people assumed hypnosis was involved. Hiro had come to know the word for hypnosis, and both he and the interpreter could only repeat, "He says it isn't. He knows what you mean, but he said that it isn't related." People wanted to question me, but I could only interpret his language and did not want to try to interpret his philosophy or his methodology. Very shortly after Mad Bear and Mike arrived at the Lexington Hotel, we all left for the International Center of Integrative Studies. A different group had gathered in the conference room at the center to meet with Jison. This time, Jison and Mad Bear would be together, which made both of them happy, and our little misadventure as we went only added to their amusement. Since there were 8 of us, we needed 2 taxis. The doorman blew his whistle, and 2 taxis pulled up. But as Hiro was talking to Mad Bear and me, I was temporarily distracted, and the doorman herded 4 of our group into one of the cabs and waved it on, and put a different party in the other cab. I, who was supposed to be constantly attentive, started to run down the street, but it was useless, and I gave up. "Those 4 don't know where to go," I told the doorman as I walked back, "and none of them speak English. This is terrible." "Not really," the doorman responded. "The driver probably doesn't speak English either." Madbear, Hiro, Mike, and I finally got another cab and set out to look for them. We drove around a while and then back to the hotel in case the driver had returned them. As soon as the driver saw they were foreigners, I said, he probably headed for the airport. Hiro became quite concerned, but Madbear only laughed. "We'll find him," Madbear insisted, and he directed our driver along one of the Midtown cross streets until we saw their cab stopped at the side of the road. Their driver appeared to be trying to talk to them. We waved and they followed, and they pulled up behind us outside of the building. Ji-son had not been concerned at all. He had simply been waiting for Madbear to catch up. Ji-son went through the same demonstrations as before, and this time Madbear watched and shared thoughts and comments of his own. Those who had gathered in the conference room experienced Ji-son in the same way the other group had, and they asked similar questions. For this event, there was a Japanese professor from Columbia University who was known to the International Center for Integrative Studies. He translated nearly instantaneously and directly, speaking as Ji-son rather than referring to him in the third person. Still, the two had to spend much time conferring with each other in Japanese. "Ji-son makes up his own terminology," the professor explained. "He speaks metaphorically, which takes getting used to. In his way of saying, he is working with the blood, so I translate blood, but I think he means a sort of energy or energy field. Perhaps he conceives an energy structure or function similar to the bloodstream. As he claims he enters the bloodstream, I think perhaps he may mean he can influence the energy system of the individual with his own energy system. I've suggested this to him, and he seems to concur." When the fragile young woman had demonstrated holding a heavy weight while stretched between the tables, with not more than an inch of her head or an inch of her heels resting on either table, several others were eager to try. Even the professor experienced it, and he laughed compulsively as we piled heavy books from the conference room shelves in several high stacks upon his chest and stomach. But he remained safely in place, though his body shook with laughter. Again the question of hypnosis was brought up, and the professor relayed the question to Ji-son. Ji-son replied, and this time there was an instant and direct translation. "Hypnosis is for tricking another person to circumvent conscious volition. Hypnosis is in every case an attack upon an individual's integrity and dignity." "What is it then? What are you doing?" came the question. "Something is added, not taken away. When there is a clear desire in mind, I only contribute to the cost." "Great!" Madbear exclaimed. Ji-son did want to be with us in Arizona, but he had already scheduled a visit to the Midwest. John and our group in Kansas had arranged a busy 3-day itinerary for him in Kansas City and at the psychophysiology lab at the Manager Research Department. While Ji-son and party were busy in the Midwest, Madbear, Mike, and I were guests in a private home in Tucson. Our host was a doctor who had met Madbear through my introduction. He had visited the Tuscarora Reservation weeks earlier and had offered to help Madbear with his southwest travels to pursue his contacts with traditional tribes. And Madbear had agreed to conduct a traditional ceremony and blessing for their land and Flagstaff where they planned to build a medical research facility. "I've been telling the doctor here about Ji-son," Madbear said to me, "and I even suggested that he might be willing to do a little demonstration when he gets here. Seems like I'm keeping him busy, volunteering him for one thing after another." "Well, if he wants to keep coming back," I said, "I guess it's a good start for him, At least he's making a lot of contacts, and he's getting used to people. When Jisun and party arrived in Tucson, I took them to the Arizona Inn and stayed there with them for several days while Mad Bear and Mike met with their people on the Hopi, Navajo, and Zuni reservations. Mad Bear's American Indian Unity Movement, as he called it, was delicate work and had all the rest of us tagged along for these meetings, it may have created a distraction for many of the traditionals. Jisun quite willingly performed some demonstrations and even offered some treatments to the guests who gathered at the home of our host. Mad Bear suggested that Jisun and his party might be invited to come along on the trip to Flagstaff for the ceremony on the land. So, nearly 24 of us drove up from Tucson, our hosts and some friends, Jisun and his people, Mad Bear, Mike, and I, and a couple of young Navajos whom Mad Bear had brought from the reservation. One of our vehicles was a used car that had been contributed to Mad Bear to facilitate his travels and contacts. We spent the night in town and the next day drove out to the land. As we walked among the evergreen trees, Jisun was impressed by the contrast between the forest of northern Arizona and the desert of the south. And tell Jisun that not one of these trees will be destroyed when they put up their buildings, Mad Bear instructed Hiro. They've told me that they're not going to destroy a single living thing of any kind, and any tree that stands where the buildings are going to go will be carefully uprooted and transplanted. This way, see, the land will give permission, and it all works out. Everything cooperates. Nowadays, that's pretty much lost. Modern people make a big mistake, even in your country. I think manipulating everything, destroying whatever gets in the way. The invaders over here, they thought they had the right to mutilate whatever they wanted, and they called this dominion. Well, there's sure plenty of proof now that this dominion business is a losing game. Can you translate all that? I want Jisun to know, and I bet he agrees with it too. That permission from the land and all the living things is the traditional native way. I told Hiro when he translated what Mad Bear had said. The native people know how to do it, and the rest of us have to learn. When we had our conference in Parkville, the non-native people in our area got a lot of bee stings the first couple of days, and Mad Bear and some other natives offered a ceremony to help, either to help us or to help the bees. During all the days after their ceremony, not one person ever got stung, even though hundreds of bees were all over us. The young Navajo natives built the ceremonial fire in the center of a clearing, and we all made a circle around it. Mad Bear, in his hat and feathers, and Jisun in his robes and clogs, stepped up to the flames, and Mad Bear made his offerings. "I'm going to speak in my own language," he told us, "and I'm going to make known what you stated to me, that you will not harm anything here, not even a single living tree. So I'll say we come here in respect and ask permission and cooperation, and I'll say that this is going to be built here as something to help others." Mad Bear spoke for a long time in Tuscarora, sprinkling tobacco into the flames. It may have been partly because I could not understand the words that his language sounded enchanting to me, but it always seemed very beautifully suited in his invocations and proclamations. When he finished, Mad Bear turned to ask Jisun if he would be willing to offer a prayer or to say anything at all. Jisun needed no explanation or translation. He stepped up to the fire, looked directly into the flames, and spoke in Japanese. Mad Bear made a final offering and turned to our hosts. "Now, you've brought that little jar, right? Does somebody have that jar? All right, what we'll do, we'll have to wait until this cooled down enough, and we'll fill the jar with the ashes here. And you should have a little ceremony for that and do it in the right way, but you can do it yourself. Then you just put these ashes right into the foundation." We left our ceremonial circle to walk around on the land until the fire was out and the coals cooled enough that we could scoop up some ashes. As we started out, Jisun stopped and looked back. One young Navajo was sitting on the ground beside the fire. He said something to Hiro and he sounded concerned. "Sensei is asking why one man is stayed behind for sitting alone," Hiro translated. Then he explained to Jison that Mad Bear had asked him to be fire guard and to watch the fire and the hot coals. "We will come back here later to get the ashes," Hiro interpreted. Jison wanted to know whether Mad Bear would prefer to get the ashes now, upon the close of the ceremony, and let the young man come along with us. Mad Bear explained that they would simply have to wait for the coals to cool, because water would wet the ashes. "All right, I can get the ashes for you," Jison said, as he walked back toward the fire. He stepped out of his clogs and, stooping over, pulled off his gloved white socks and laid them over his clogs. Barefoot, he stepped into the fire, holding his robes away from the flames. The fire was burning low and almost out, but the coals were glowing bright red. The coals crunched under his bare feet as he stomped on them. Sparks flew. This was not ordinary firewalking. Jison stayed long in the fire, pulverizing the coals into small pieces, grinding them to ashes by twisting his feet, and then standing on them until they were smothered and cool enough for him to scoop up into his hands. He held out his cupped hands and said something in Japanese. "May we put the ashes in the jar?" Hiro translated. Jison and Mad Bear filled the jar with ashes and put the lid on. With the palms of his hands, Mad Bear smoothed what remained of the ashes into a large circle on the ground and wiped his hands with his handkerchief. Jison brushed the ashes from his feet and put on his socks and his clogs, and we walked away. One of our hosts, wondering what had become of Jison's feet, continually questioned him through Hiro as we walked. "Did his feet not even blister?" he wondered. "Can he be sure? Did he examine them? Doesn't it hurt him now to walk? Didn't he feel any pain?" Finally, Hiro said, "Sensei wants you to not look on him as crazy man. Maybe you can know there is not anything strange in him." Hiro and I discussed Jison's words and decided that Jison said he was not a martyr. Jison said that he's not hurt and that he's neither crazy nor a martyr. I explained. Again, we spent the night in Flagstaff, and in the morning after breakfast, we drove south. "We might as well stay in Phoenix," I had suggested to Hiro during breakfast. "When you fly out of Tucson, you have to change planes in Phoenix anyway, so there's no need to go back to Tucson. I'll stay with you and see you off at the airport tomorrow. This will give us our last chance to talk." So Jison and his party and I were dropped off in Phoenix, and Mad Bear and Mike went on to Tucson with our hosts and the others. Again, Mad Bear and Jison agreed that they would meet on down the road, as Mad Bear had put it. We let Jison have the afternoon to himself, and in the evening, after supper, we all gathered in his room. "It seems like this was a really short trip this time," I told Hiro. "I wonder if Jison feels that he has accomplished what he wanted." "I think he feels okay," Hiro replied. "We had many meetings in San Francisco, New York, Kansas, and Arizona, and when we get back to San Francisco, it is 2 weeks completely. It looks like a more short time to you because you were not with us sometimes. Anyway, you know, Sensei wants to do something together with more people. Now he is very much thinking about the society in this world. I told you it before. We are getting so strong for technology, but every year the society is becoming weak. So human ability is getting more and more weak, and now people only believe machines, and they don't develop their body. But Sensei is also asking what should we do now. He wants to meet doctors and people like Mad Bear's style, and also do training like what he is doing in his temple. Jison's abilities will be apparent to whomever he meets," I said. "He's done a lot of amazing things with others, but he's also demonstrated his capacity to control himself." But Jisun is always telling that it is not so unusual, whatever he is doing. So he wants to do training. Whoever will be interesting enough, they can develop such ability. He said so. Maybe I think it takes a long time. But for what Jisun wants to do with others, the challenge is going to be communication, I asserted. Somehow, we have to deal with the language problem. It is so difficult to translate the speaking of Jisun, Hiro agreed. When Sensei talked in Mad Bear's ceremony and Flagstaff, almost we could not understand him. But you told us we don't need translation for that part, so I was glad. I think I could not be able to say it in English. Also, don't forget, none of us understood what Mad Bear was saying when he spoke in Tuscarora, I reminded him. Mad Bear was the only one there who knew what he said. He explained it a little bit before we began, but there was no translation and we didn't need it, because he wasn't talking to us. When Jisun said his prayer or whatever, he wasn't talking to us either. Maybe they were talking to the god, or what? Or maybe they were talking to the animals or the trees or the land. I was thinking about that when we were walking back. I would say it's the communication behind the language. They say God or the Great Spirit can understand any language or any thought, right? So when you pray, or when you meditate, or do a ceremony or a healing, you don't need any language. What you need is the thought or the mental picture. Remember the rain at Council Grove last time you were here? And think of all Jinsun's demonstrations, how, for example, he affects the temperature in his own body or in others. When we or any of the patients or trainees learn to raise our skin temperature, or lower our heart rate or blood pressure, what we actually have to learn is to make mental pictures. And we use our own language for that. We actually make phrases. Our bodies don't need the language, but they respond to the mental pictures. It's what Jisun does when he works with other people, or controls his own body, right? It's what the medicine people do when they prepare the land or plant seeds or make rain. Like he said himself, he has to concentrate on the result and contribute something of himself to that. It's all the same thing, the ceremony for the land in Flagstaff, or rainmaking, or Jisun's demonstrations and healings, or whatever. It's just a larger body that extends outside the skin. What is he saying? Jisun asked, and Hiro undertook to translate. I don't know if I understood exactly, Hiro said, but I think Sensei is also having the same idea. It is why really healers can make the same technique to the society or to any place. But still, for Jisun's contacts with others, I maintained, and for his explanations, we'll have to work on the interpretation. We'll have to find the right words. For example, you and everyone else who translated for him used the word blood and bloodstream. I guess those are the words he used in Japanese, right? He always says blood. How do you say, bloodstream? He said what we control is inside the bloodstream, so we have to make a change in the blood. He said what we control is inside bloodstream, so we have to make a change in the blood. But when he says blood, perhaps he means something besides the red blood you can put into a test tube. I think the blood he's referring to, or changes in the blood, could not be seen under a microscope, right? Hiro translated my proposition. Now you understanding, exactly, Sensei says. This kind of bloodstream, most of people cannot see it. It is exactly energy, like electricity, but he thinks it like bloodstream. Now he is saying that he explained already that kind of information. It is difficult for him because he cannot understand the translation, and he cannot know it's communicating or not. You know what chi is, right, don't you? I asked. Maybe Jisun is referring to chi. Jisun heard the word as I said it, and commented directly. It is relation to chi, Sensei is saying, but it has to be understood the name as it is blood or bloodstream. To enter that, he has to know the system. The word he said, I don't know in English. Maybe I can say it something like map, but more than, because if you know the map, you can move around in it. Anyway, Sensei is really understanding that we are needing the communication most. Always he is repeating that such people like Sensei have to make a team. Long time ago, such kind of healers always did it alone, and maybe just with their helpers. Now, they cannot. They have to find each other among many cultures and do it like a team. Mad Bear and I have talked a lot about this, I said, about teams of healers from many cultures working together. I told them about the Shinto priest that Mad Bear and I had met at the United Nations, and how he had spoken for such gathering and teamwork on a planetary scale. Tell Ji-son that this is Mad Bear's work. No, Hiro said, he knows. The next day, I waited with them at the airport until they boarded their plane for San Francisco and home. Back in Tucson, Mad Bear had been busy making plans. I'm getting on me a little place out here in Tucson, he told me. I might have mentioned to you a while back that it would sure be good for me to winter out here anyways. With me having to chop wood and my back getting kind of weak, I can picture you out there too. I had no such picture, not until he put it there. After that, I could not get the picture out of my mind. Anyways, we've been checking around down in South Tucson. There's some pretty cute little places over that way, and pretty cheap too. You know me, I don't need much. He found one such cute little place, which he insisted was just meant for him, and we went directly to the broker's office to start the necessary arrangements. Then he and Mike drove back to New York in their new used car. By the time Mad Bear had boarded up and protected his Tuscarora home and returned to Tucson with his suitcases and boxes, and I phoned them after having only looked in at the one place. We're ready, they said, so we moved in. Before long, John and others of our group came down from Topeka, Kansas City, and Minneapolis, and moved in with us. And we had a community household and a new national headquarters for the Cross-Cultural Studies program. Thus, we began our next round. Joel flew out from Florida to spend a few days with us in Tucson. On his first evening, we went to Mad Bear's place and talked. We went to Mad Bear's place and talked until late. When Mad Bear suggested it might be time to hit the hay, it was nearly midnight. So we can carry on tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow's a whole new day. I'll give you guys a call in the morning. He did, before sunrise. It was around 5 o'clock and there was only a hint of daylight in the air. Mad Bear's on the phone already, Tim told me. I don't know what he's got in mind, but we're going back to sleep. What's up? Mad Bear inquired in a loud, cheerful voice. Up? Nobody. Nobody in Tucson, except you, Mad Bear. No, he said. That's what you think. Let me tell you what's poppin'. You want to know what's poppin'? This is a good one. Listen to this. Something woke me up, and I turned on the news, the local news on the radio, and they were talking about the rodeo. The rodeo on the radio, I repeated sleepily. And to myself, I thought, now what does this have to do with me? Listen, it's a big thing, a major event around here. Now, you know me. I'm not too much for these rodeos, well, not at all, really. But guess what? The whole thing is going to be kicked off with a big parade. I mean, this is going to be a big one with music and dancers and everything. What do you call those Mexican bands? Something like maraschinos? Mariachis. I mean, this is going to be the whole works. If we go now, we can get a good spot right up by the road. I know just where they're going to go. Why don't I come pick you guys up? We could throw some folding chairs in the trunk. Now, who all up there wants to go to the parade? Well, I'm not really sure, I said, trying to sound somewhat engaged. I was not even sure about myself. Maybe if it were in the afternoon or evening or next week. Look, why don't you grab a cup of coffee and check it out? Call me back and let me know what's the consensus up there. Or should I just come on up? No, let me call you back. Well, don't be too long. You know what they say. The early bird... Yeah, I know, I said. No one really wanted to go, or even to wake up enough to sincerely discuss it. Who wants to get up and go to the parade? I felt embarrassed even to pose such a proposition at 5 o'clock in the morning. Well, somehow this has really struck on him, I said. I don't want to call him back and tell him that no one is interested. I guess I'll go along with him myself. I'll go with you, Joel offered. So Mad Bear pulled into the driveway somewhere around 6 o'clock, and we put 2 folding chairs in the trunk of his car because he had brought one of his own. Maybe we ought to throw a few more in there, he suggested. I bet you we could probably rent some out. We decided not to rent chairs that day, but Mad Bear seemed in the mood to rent something. We appeared to be among the first to arrive anywhere along the parade route, and we saw that local charitable groups had roped off sections of the side streets for parking and were charging $5 per car. That's what we'll do, Mad Bear said. Let's get us a piece of street before they're all gone. I think we can find a spot a little ways away and won't have to pay, Joel proposed. No, Mad Bear replied. Let me show you what I got in mind. Let's go straight through here and hang a right. We turned onto a nearby deserted street where no cars were parked and no signs had been put up. Pull into that alley, Mad Bear said, suddenly twisting himself in his seat and looking down the street. A woman with a carload of kids was just turning the corner. Mad Bear stuck an old cigar in his mouth and jumped out and waved to her. You parkin'? He asked with a friendly grin. We're only charging $2 out here. That's for all day, too. Great, she said. Where do you want me? Just anywhere right along here. With all the kids and all the things to carry, she struggled to get into her purse. Here, hold this, she called to one of the older ones. That's all right, Mad Bear said. Tell you what I'm going to do. Since you got all these kids, you're the first one here anyways, I'm going to let it go. Let's just say you're covered. Well, I don't really mind, she responded. What fund does this go to? It's all supposed to go to my cigar fund, he answered. But since I don't have any matches, this one seems to be lasting pretty good. The woman gave him a puzzled look, and then she giggled happily. I may have some matches here somewhere, she offered. Mad Bear laughed out loud. No, we're just kidding, he admitted. We came to see the parade. We took our chairs under our arms and started down toward the main road. I was sure trying to keep a straight face, he said, but I just got so tickled. Wait a minute, here comes another car. Again, he thrust his cigar into his mouth. Just pull right in here, he bellowed, trying to sound official. Only $2 here all day. They stopped in the middle of the road and glared at him. There were 3 macho-looking middle-aged men inside. First they frowned and then they smiled. Yeah, sure, one of them said. But that's before tax, right? Well, we're not even parking and we're just driving through here. Oh, well then, never mind the whole thing. Mad Bear, you're going to get yourself in trouble one of these days. Trouble? No, actually, it's the other way around. Untrouble, guess you could say. A day like today. It's a good day for untroubling. We placed our chairs right at the road alongside the edge of the park. Well, we'll have to sit here and wait a while, but with these front row seats, I'd say it's worth it. And we're down low, not blocking anybody else, and then somebody'll be up on that embankment back there. He turned in his chair to look behind him and noticed that people were beginning to gather in the park, and he got up to go talk to them. Don't let anybody grab my chair, he called back to us, and if they do, well, see how much you can get for it. Joel looked at me. What in the world is he up to today? Wonder what's gotten into him. Have you ever seen him like this? Every once in a while, actually, I told him. I think it has something to do with his work. You mean this is part of his work? Acting like this? Well, I think it has to do more with his other work, or his work elsewhere, if you know what I mean. I've found that this behavior has a lot to do with whatever he's been doing somewhere else. I remember one time out in Utah when this fairly young native guy started talking to me. He may have been a college student, but he somehow knew Mad Bear. Mad Bear had been out there with the Ute people about a year earlier, I know, working as a mediator on some intertribal issue of some sort. Anyway, this guy said to me, Do you understand where Mad Bear is doing his medicine? I answered, Yes, I guess it's all over. And he said, In the spirit world, you may not know, he said, that only a few, maybe some medicine people have seen him like a bear. Don't know if you ever witnessed that yourself, but I'll tell you one thing for sure. For one of the most friendly people you'd ever hope to meet, he can be one of the most ferocious whenever he needs to be. I still remember that guy standing in the bookstore on the campus and telling me that. That was fairly early in my acquaintance with Mad Bear. But a lot of times since then, I've seen him at work, at least from the perspective from this side. And you know what I think? I think that Mad Bear often serves himself as his own comic relief. But, Joel said, you have to wonder what some of these people think. We know him, they don't. He comes on to strangers like everyone knows everyone. I think he really dislikes the notion of strangers, I said. In the traditional tribes and villages, there were no strangers. The idea is actually unthinkable. Still, he's about the most forward and outgoing native I've ever seen. Maybe that's how he works his medicine on this level. Like we were saying before up at his place, he's always trying to break down barriers, to connect people some way, or help them feel connected. So I guess this is a part of his work too, here on this level. Well, they do seem to get some kind of a lift out of him. I remember one time, I related, when he pulled up onto an intersection right alongside this old guy on a bicycle waiting for the light to change. The man was really old and feeble, and he looked pretty depressed. I mean, really down in the face. He was skinny too, really weak. He had a scruffy beard and a little backpack hanging over this dirty, torn t-shirt. A pretty sad-looking sight, I thought. Mad Bear noticed it too. He said, "Roll down the window real quick." And he leaned over the passenger side window. He hollered, "Hey!" And the old man gave a jump and spun his head around. He kinda stooped and squinted, trying to see inside the car. Well, he got one look at Mad Bear's broad face with that huge barn door grin, and he started to smile, and Mad Bear shouted, "My God, are you running away from home again?" Somehow, that got to him, and the guy really cracked up. The light changed and he pedaled on his way, and his whole posture was changed. Then, at the next stoplight, he pulled up beside the window and waved. He was literally twinkling. I've seen that sort of thing again and again with Mad Bear. Whatever he does, I think it's very much on purpose. Except for maybe some of the things he eats, Joel remarked. Maybe that, too, I replied. Mad Bear came back and sat in his chair, and soon we could hear the sounds of the parade in the distance. Mad Bear leaned over to look down the street. "Oh, the anticipation," he joked. "We can hardly contain ourselves. I better watch I don't lean right out of this chair, though. If I hit the deck, it's hard getting up again." One reason I didn't want to sit on the ground. Everybody go home and I'd still be sitting here. Bands and drummers and marchers went by, and there were floats and people on horseback all dressed up in fancy hats and spurs. A group of teenage girls passed by in skirts and moccasins with painted faces and headbands with bright blue feathers sticking up. Mad Bear covered his grin with both hands. "Hope they don't spot me laughing," he said. "That must seem a pretty ludicrous sight to you," Joel commented. "Not only that," Mad Bear responded, "but it looks kind of funny too. I just hope they don't start flapping their hands over the lips and going, woo woo woo, or I may have to step out there. Too bad they couldn't get any of these real people, with all these Indians around here. But then others, when they do, look on them as tokens or Uncle Tomahawks or something. It's a shame, too. We've got some out-of-sight dancers and performers. This is just our sort of thing. Our people are a social, festive people. Supposed to be, anyways." As the costume group passed right in front of us, he called out rather loudly, "Some of Woolworth's finest regalia." He looked at us for our reaction. Sorry, I couldn't help that. When the last of the parade had passed, he suggested we spend a few more moments sitting in our chairs. "I don't want to go packing our folding chairs through all these crowds of people. Besides, they're all going to the rodeo except for us. We'll have to cook up something else, though. It's sure too early to go home on a big day like this." "Oh, I don't know," Joel said. "Speaking of something cooking, it just hit me. They come in to see the famous mission, and then they come in here for their tax-free cigarettes." "Mad Bear talks to these people like old friends," Joel repeated as we stood at the booth eating our fry bread. "This bread's not bad, by the way, but I hope I can get away with only one piece of it." "I like it," I told him, "so I can eat some of yours, and these people, I suppose, really are old friends." But the place was rather dead, and Mad Bear seemed concerned. There were people in and out of the cigarette shop, and some did pause to look over the several tables around the courtyard with their beautiful displays of turquoise chokers and other native jewelry, but from a distance. "Come on, let's say hello to my friends over here," Mad Bear suggested, gulping down one last big piece of fry bread and rubbing his hands together. "This young friend here is Joe, and this man right here is Joel. Pretty near the same name, right? Just the L, so you twos might be related, just sort of distant-like. And this is Doug here. We've been traveling together." "I think I may have seen you before," I offered. "No, you didn't," Mad Bear responded. "So how's it going? Anything moving today?" "Nope," the young man said simply. "You mean nothing? You sold nothing yet?" The young Navajo sat behind a long table with a black velvet cloth covered with beautiful bracelets, chokers, and necklaces. It looked spectacular. "Nope," he repeated. "Nothing." "And who's that young couple over there?" he asked, pointing. The young man and woman were sitting across the courtyard behind a table with a similar display of jewelry, and no one was going near it. They were sitting on the edge of a brick wall that formed a small enclosure that perhaps once served as a barbecue pit, or was the remains of some sort of chimney. And inside the enclosure was a baby goat. "I haven't seen them before. Are they from the reservation?" "Nope," Joe replied. "They've been coming up here every day from Mexico with their stuff. But they ain't sold nothing. Nothing ever since they've been here." Mad Bear glanced around the grounds. There were a few people around, but only a few, mostly out-of-state tourists, by appearances. "You know, Joe," he said, "I had a dream about you the other night. I've been meaning to tell you. You know my dreams can be significant, prophetic even, most of the time. I dreamed you got married." "Oh yeah?" "Yeah, but the thing was, this woman. I mean, she was a real shocker, older than you and about 3 times your weight, maybe 4. And in my dream, she came walking right up to you in a public place and proposed, right on the spot. She had on this bright green jacket and a hat. I mean, that hat. It had huge feathers, ostrich maybe, dyed bright orange and stretching way out a couple feet in the air. And you accepted right off the bat. That's what got me. You were trying to explain, maybe for your own sake. You said, 'Well, I can't help myself. She reminds me of someone I used to love in high school.'" Joel was staring across the courtyard and Mad Bear looked at him. "What? What's the matter with you? What are you staring at? You look like you've seen a ghost." "It's my dream coming true right here on the spot." "Oh, come on, Bear. No, really, it's her and you're gonna flip out when she proposes. Look, she's coming over this way. I think she spotted you, Joe. What's gonna happen? The big question? Speaking of the big question, I know she's gonna pop it." The woman noticed us looking at her, and she and the man she was with walked right towards us, with their eyes on Joe's table. "Now don't you dare crack a smile," he warned Joe, "or I'm sure to bust out laughing." We must have all looked considerably cheerful to the couple, for they both greeted us with big smiles. Actually, we were trying to keep from laughing. "Do you have anything you'd like to say to this young man?" Mad Bear asked her. "Well, maybe," she answered. "I'm not sure yet." "My God," he said to Joe. "She's standing here trying to make up her mind, and here you are trying to make up yours." In spite of his efforts, Joe could not keep from laughing. "He kinda got a good feeling when he saw you coming," Mad Bear exclaimed to the woman. "It seems you remind him of someone he once thought a great deal of. We're just hoping he doesn't start to get a crush on you or something." She laughed. Both Mad Bear and the woman were holding cans of soda, and both were equally stout. I could see that to her, Mad Bear seemed jolly, warm, and friendly. "She seems to kind of like you," he said to Joe, "but she doesn't want to embarrass you." "Oh no," the woman asserted. "I won't embarrass him." Joe, are you okay? Are you—" "Mad Bear, don't bother him now," Joel interrupted. "He's busy right now." Her husband, or whoever he was holding a necklace and handing Joe some money. Joe was making a sale. "What did you pick?" the woman asked. She stepped up to make her own selection, and another woman stepped up beside her. "Maybe they'll pick the same thing," Mad Bear observed loudly enough to be heard. "But maybe they won't. Different people like different things." Within moments, there was a small crowd around the table, and those who were ready to pay began to form a line. "We better step aside," Mad Bear said to us. Let's go meet that Mexican couple. As we started in their direction, Mad Bear noticed another tourist couple with a boy of perhaps 12 years who was watching a bee flying around him and looking somewhat apprehensive. Look out! Mad Bear shouted. It's a bee! It's a bee! The boy was startled and he jumped back. Just then the bee landed on the boy's leg. Oh my God! Mad Bear went on. It's on your jeans! It's on your jeans! Right there on your jeans! Now what are you going to do? The boy looked at his parents. It's all right, Mad Bear said. I'm going to take care of it for you. He was drawing a crowd with his loud voice. People who had just come through the entrance were gathering around to see what was happening, and everyone stood watching the bee crawl up to the boy's pant leg. Looks like this is where I come in, Mad Bear said. Let me handle this. At that moment, the bee flew right toward Mad Bear. Mad Bear made a quick snatch in the air and held his clenched fist in his ear. Got him! He exclaimed, putting his hand to his mouth and opening his fist between his lips. He stuck out his chin and his belly as well, and began to chew contemplatively. He made a big, exaggerated gulp and announced, Well, that takes care of that. People stared with their mouths open. Oh, it's okay, he said reassuringly. We eat 'em raw. They're too small to cook. Joel and I had no idea whether the bee had flown away unseen or whether it had literally disappeared. It might have been in Mad Bear's pocket, but we were almost certain it was not in his stomach. And we supposed it didn't matter what the others thought. The courtyard was crowded with tourists, and it felt like a fair or a festival. I just came to say greetings and hello, Mad Bear announced to the couple from Mexico. Now there were people listening to his every word. But most of all, I came to give my respects to your fine-looking goat. My friends over there were telling me how they've been admiring your goat. It's about the most handsome thing they've seen in a long time. Much thanks you, said the young man, looking in Joe's direction. Yeah, Mad Bear declared. They admire it so much, they gave it a name, a Navajo name. Oh, that's right. That's right, a Navajo name. It means super. Several looked at him in surprise and, seeing his wide grin, began to laugh. He looked back at them and laughed with them and proclaimed loudly, still laughing, These people have some beautiful items here while they last. They brought them in all the way south of the border, and at the same astounding prices. But it's first come, first serve on the choicest items. For the first time, if what Joe had been said was true, the couple got busy. I believe they'll sell out pretty quick, Mad Bear told us. I hope we didn't overdo it. We? Joe said to me. So what we'll do, see that other Navajo over there? That's Joe's cousin, or so he told me the other day. I don't know him too well, but I'll introduce you anyways. Mad Bear made the introductions, but several people were following him around, and they now began to look over the items on the cousin's table. Mad Bear stepped back, cupped his hands to the side of his mouth, and confided to us in the loudest possible whisper, There's one piece here I got on mind, and by golly, I hope no one notices it. It's so precious that if anyone looks too closely, they'll snap it right up. I'd like to point it out to you, but that'd sure heck give it away. Some looked at Mad Bear to see where his eyes were focused, but others simply examined the items to find their choices. I believe they may all sell out today, Mad Bear declared. Anyways, these guys are too preoccupied, so we might as well be on our way. Unless you got some appetite for a little more of that fry bread. We did not need more fry bread, and in any case, there was a long line at the booth. We walked to the side gate, and Mad Bear turned around and looked over the crowd. Goodbye, he bellowed in a roaring voice, raising his arm high in the air, and many waved back. It was as though this was his village. Take good care, super there, and all you people, thanks for coming, and have a great day. You too, came many cheery voices, and we went out the gate back to the car. That's a medicine man at work, Joel remarked to me as Mad Bear stopped to talk to one of the local natives. That's medicine in the classical sense, as I've seen it, and a sort of questionable application though, but there's no doubt what he was doing there, and people were happy with it. He wasn't twisting any arms, just breaking the ice, I guess you could say. Breaking the ice, that's what it is, I agreed. Whatever level he's working on, that's a major part of it. He energizes people, is what he does, Joel deliberated. In this physical realm, anyway, it's kind of like putting energy into the atmosphere. We had 4, 5 hours sleep, and here he is, moving all this energy around. That's it, I concurred. That's the medicine person in a nutshell. That's the medicine person, the shaman, the rainmaker, the martial arts adept, the healer, or whatever. They may look different on the outside, and they may have a different focus or objective, but they're all adept the same powerful technique, whoever they are, and they all claim it's part of the natural human potential. They focus and they move energy. A visit to Mad Bear's had for so long required a cross-country flight, a change of plans, a shuttle bus out to Buffalo, and a rendezvous in Niagara Falls. But now he was a short drive away. As I look back, it occurs to me that the whole Arizona arrangement may have been an intentional strategy on his part. In any case, as it turned out, he made use of his proximity and he made his presence felt. There were times when I would think of his old place on the reservation and the elaborate setup that allowed him his evasion when it was convenient, and I would consider how we might arrange for ourselves such an option. With his talent for finding something poppin', or, if necessary, ordering it, and with his many contacts and connections and his constant suggestions and encouragement, Mad Bear induced us into an ongoing journey of many destinations and no end. Epilogue. Mad Bear's physical body yielded to his challengers long before he actually left the earth. It was a slow and painful process, and, for those who knew and worked with him, it was sad to see. "He's going to leave us," lamented the woman from the Native Center in Niagara Falls. "And when that happens, that's it. We will never have another like him ever again. I wish he'd take better care of himself," people would say as his health worsened. "He thinks about everyone except himself." "He knows what he's doing," others would say. "He's mainly active on another level, out of sight for most of us. The opposing forces may be able to get to his body, but they can't get the best of his medicine." The opposing forces, notwithstanding, it seemed to me, as I watched him weaken, his own inattentiveness to his physical health was destroying the only aspect of Mad Bear that I could consciously see and relate to. "What are you trying to do?" I confronted him one day, speaking to him in my dismay, as I had never spoken to him before. "Are you trying to die, or what?" In April 1979, we found him at his home sitting in the dark, barely able to stand or to speak. His back was badly bruised. "I've been banging myself against this post here," he explained, "until my back's all black and blue. It brings me back. Sometimes my body starts to quit on me, or I start to give it up. It takes some pretty darn good whack sometimes to crank it up again and get myself in here." "Why don't you tell us straightforward what's going on with you?" I said. "I can't understand if you want to die or not. It's up to you. But if you want to die, you've got to let us help you." "I'd be happy to go, to tell you the truth. Sometimes I'm mighty tempted to just give up the whole ghost and turn away from the whole thing. Somehow I've got to hang around till I get some of these things taken care of." Mad Bear did hang around for more than 6 years. In the winter of 1984, we flew him back out to Tucson and arranged for him to stay on the Papago Reservation near the San Xavier Mission, where he could be cared for by his old native friends. He needed care. He was often confused and disoriented, as well as weak and in pain. During those last months in Tucson, his last months on Earth, I was away on travel most of the time, and I saw little of him. Tim and John and several of our staff tried to spend time with him and to help with his affairs as much as they could. Various healers and medicine people came to see him or to look in on him in their own way. "Don't worry about what is going on with his person," they would tell us. "Most of Mad Bear is out of sight of you now. He only keeps enough presence to sustain the body." I did not know Mad Bear's age, but I knew he was not old. Somewhere in his early 60s, I supposed, and I kept hoping he would recover. I thought about him sitting at his table back home on the reservation, happily making notes on his travel plans and projects or on his book, Earth Mother Crying, and wondered what would become of his important work. But when I consulted with the medicine people and with his closest colleagues, I was assured that he would not return in this particular body. Though his body had succumbed sooner than he would have wished, he was carrying on, nevertheless, and not retreating from the contest. It was all part of being his sort of warrior. The plans and projects he had pursued in his lifetime would be carried on by others, just as he had served a vision that had been initiated long before his time. He was involved in a great contest, I was told by those who claimed they knew, serving as a mediator in a struggle over the earth. So long as his heart was beating, his body served as an anchor to hold his presence and his focus to the earthly realm. He is working with others who need him. He volunteered for it, and he knows what he's doing. But it won't be long, and we'll bury him, and he'll go on. Mad Bear left his body in November 1985. I like to imagine that he was with, or working with, the ones we had come to call those who care. And I often recall his response when I related to him the message he had urged me to listen for. Those who care deeply and strongly, and blame is beside the point with us. And for those who fear, jump up unto the level of heart. "Maybe that's the important part," he had said. "That part about no blame and about the heart level. That's the fourth world." Mad Bear had committed to memory and had often recited, in public presentations, or even as we sat in the quiet of his own home, the well-known speech of Chief Seattle. I hear Mad Bear's voice when I recall it, and the closing lines remain strong in my memory. "At night, when the streets of your cities and villages will be silent, and you think them deserted, they will throng with the returning hosts that once filled and still love this beautiful land. The white man will never be alone. Let him be just and deal kindly with my people, for the dead are not powerless." Dead, did I say? There is no death, only a change of worlds.